Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. I'm in the masjid here in Ohio. My children have Saturday class today, so I'm waiting for them to finish their Saturday class. But there was a post today that was on Facebook, and it was about the masjid wars. And in the video, there was a female academic from a university who was doing research on the Salafi community in Philadelphia. And it was funny because this is not something new. They've been studying us for a long time. I'm gonna tell you a quick story. I was back home in Detroit, and back during that time, Masjid Tawheed on Warren Avenue was popping. Masjid Tawheed was the masjid to go to. That's where most of the salafis, or all of the salafis that I knew, went there. And the imam, his name was Hafs, Abu Hafs was his name, I believe. Brother from Yemen who had studied under Sheikh Muqbil ibn Hadi al-Wa'di, I believe. I'm just off the top of my head. Anyway, so one day I was walking into the masjid, and there was two white women in makeshift hijabs. You could tell the way they tied it, they were not Muslim, or they were not knowledgeable as to how to wear the hijab properly. They had it tied like a scarf underneath their neck, and they were standing with a white guy. So they were standing like in front of the masjid. And I mean, obviously they looked awkward. They looked out of place. So as I get out of my car and I'm walking in, and I look at them and they look at me, and they said, "Excuse me, can you help us?" And I'm like, okay, what is this about? And they said, "Could we speak to the imam of the masjid? We'd like to speak." So in my mind, I'm thinking, okay, this is like a Daw'ah situation. But I did think it was strange that this guy showed up with two women. So I go into the masjid. The imam is not in his usual spot. So I go down into the basement. The imam is down there with a bunch of other Yemeni brothers, and they're drinking tea, sitting around this round table. I tell the imam, and keep in mind, he didn't speak any English. So he always had a brother with him who would do the translation if anybody didn't speak Arabic. So I spoke to the brother, and he told the imam what I said. The imam said, yes, let him come on down. So this is where it gets good. So he comes downstairs. I went upstairs. I escorted the guy and the two women. I escorted them downstairs. The women stayed in the back of the back behind the guy that they came with, and changed my location. And then the gentleman was asked to come sit down. So he goes and he sits down, and he informs them that he's from the university and he's doing some research and he would like to ask some questions. So he introduced himself. Again, he told him who he was in the university. I believe he was with Wayne State. I believe it was Wayne State. So anyway, he begins to ask these questions. So he would give the question to the translator. The translator would give it to the imam. And in response, the imam would ask him questions in reference to Tawheed, questions in reference to, did he know who Allah was? Did he know who Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam was? And they were throwing questions back and forth, back and forth. And the Imam would answer his questions, but then he would come right back with a question. So then this didn't go on very long. Let me sort of take this back. He asked one or two questions, and then the guy says, "Can I speak directly to the Imam?" And the translator said, "Well, he doesn't speak English." And he said, "No problem." And he begins to speak to him in Fusha, clear Fusha. And at that point, you could see all the eyebrows in the room go up, like, okay, who is this guy? He's speaking clear Fusha. And the Imam looked at him like, okay. So then they start having conversation, and he explained to the Imam that he had been researching and lived in some Muslim land, and he studied Fusha, and he's fluent, and he can read it, he can write it. So then the demeanor of the Imam began to change. And he basically, that's when he started giving him Daw'ah. That's when he began to ask him, these questions, the ones that I mentioned before about Tawheed and what he understood about Islam, what his position was on Islam. And then the guy said, "Well, I want it to be understood. I am not interested in converting or reverting to Islam at all. I'm a Christian. I'm deep into the church. This is strictly for academic purposes." And the Imam said, "Have a nice day." He cut it short. He was like, "We're done here. Have a nice day. Please escort them out." He cut it off because the purpose of him even speaking to him was for da'wah, not to aid in him in taking information back to those who may or may not be the enemies of Islam, or to take information back, twist it and misconstrue it. Once he made it clear, "I am not interested." And this guy had lived in a Muslim land. I think he lived in Philistine. I believe that's where he lived. And he studied and became fluent in Fusha. He could read all the books. Once that became clear, the Imam's demeanor changed. And everybody looked around the room like, okay, like, what are we dealing with? The guy said, "Look, I'm going to be honest with you. I'm not interested in coming to Islam. I'm doing research." The Imam cut him off, said, "Have a nice day." And the guy looked like, "Well, what did I do? I don't understand." And the Imam said, "My purpose for talking to you is to call you to Islam. I'm not interested in anything else. Have a nice day." And we escorted the guy out. Him, and I assume that the two women with him were either professors themselves, or they were some type of research assistant or something like this. Now, we're talking early 2000s that this happened. Not early, maybe early to mid 2000s that this happened. For those that are familiar with Masjid Tawheed, it was back when Abu Hafs was the Imam. So you can chime in and give me a time frame for that. But it was that long ago. So them doing research on us and trying to get information is not new. They've been at it for a while. It is going to take academics, Muslim academics, preferably academics upon the minhaj of the Salaf, to control our own narrative. If we don't do this work, if we don't have qualified academics putting in work, publishing, interviewing, answering questions, then our narrative is going to be controlled. Our story is going to be whatever they decide to tell it to be. And that's not going to be good for us, because we understand, how that works out for African American community. You know what I mean? We don't control our own narrative as African Americans. Our image, our likeness, our story is being told by other than us many times, especially in academia, because we don't control publishing. We don't control the books that are being taught. We don't control the content that's in the books either. So now that Islam and Salafiyyah is on the radar, we need to control it, and it has to come from qualified sources. It has to come from an integration, as I've said before, an integration of Muslim academics and the people of knowledge, the people who are Islamically qualified to teach and speak on certain issues. We need to create our own curriculum, our own books, our own pedagogical approach. We have to understand, control the epistemology of what's being taught to the Muslim youth from, kindergarten on through the university. We have to control that. So I just wanted to share that short story. And again, this was back during the time of Abu Hafs, so it was maybe mid-2000s, something like that, early to mid-2000s, that this incident happened. So that's that. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.